Hello, and welcome to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today's video is part of a series I do where I compare books with their movie adaptation. And before we get into the book and movie, I want to warn you that there will be spoilers for both the book and the movie, so if you plan on reading the book or watching the movie, you should do that first, and then come back and watch this video. I also want to tell you that this is available as a podcast. I will link to Spotify and Apple down below because those are the two most popular platforms, but I am on other platforms as well. So these tend to be about 30 minutes, but especially if they're longer and it works better for you to listen to it, that is available. And I also want to say that even though my podcast is called Why the Book Wins, I do love movies as well, and there are times where the movie wins when comparing book versus movie. So it is not always the book, because I do love movies, and oftentimes, before I even started this podcast, the reason I would read a book was because I liked the movie, and so I wanted to read the book for it. And so I love both, essentially, and I think I give a fair view of both book and movie, despite my name being Why the Book Wins. Anyway, thank you for clicking on this video. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, let's get right into the book versus movie. Hello and welcome to Why the Book Wins. Thank you for joining me here today. We are talking about Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, which was released in 2009, and then the movie was released in 2015 and is directed by Gilles Paquet-Brenner. And today is very exciting because I have a guest on. She is an author as well as a fellow booktuber. So we have Shannon Hovey here joining us today. So Shannon, welcome to Why the Book Wins.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And so like I said, Shannon is an author. You wrote Since September, which is a novella, and then you are currently writing a novel, correct?
Yes.
And
I'm editing right now.
Oh, wow. So the writing part is done?
Yep.
Wow. And then Since September, I read that and it was really good. And that one was thriller, not horror necessarily. There were some scary moments, but it was more thriller. And is your new book a thriller as well?
It's not. It's actually a true story, or based on a true story.
That's awesome.
More like, drama, but not thriller.
Yeah, that's exciting. Do you know when it'll be out, or is it hard to say?
It's kind of hard to say. It's basically, without saying too much, what happens when somebody you thought you really knew for 18 or 16 years turns out to be completely different person.
That sounds interesting. Maybe a different sort of thriller in a way.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's kind of a tragic story, I guess, but
yeah. Wow, yeah. Like I said, Since September was really good, so I'll be excited to read your new book when it comes out.
I hope I get it done soon.
Yeah. And then we've been connecting through YouTube for a while now, like commenting on each other's videos. And I think you mentioned Dark Places in a video, and I was like, oh, I want to read that too. And so that's how we ended up collaborating on this one. And it definitely seems like a book that's up your alley, because a lot of your booktube videos, like thrillers, horrors.
Yep.
Okay, so getting right into Dark Places, I will just do a brief summary. Sorry, I feel like I do so much talking in the first
That's okay.
part.
Go right ahead.
But for those who don't know, so Dark Places, we follow Libby Day, who is in her early 30s, and we find out that her family, her mom and her two sisters were killed when she was only 7 years old, and they suspect the brother did it, and so he has been in jail. Ever since she turned 18, she hasn't needed to get a job because these murders were so famous that people donated money to Libby, and so she's been able to just live off this money her whole adult life. However, now she's in her early 30s and the money is running out, and then she gets a letter from this guy named Lyle, and he is part of this group of true crime fanatics, and so he's willing to pay her to come to this club he has, and since she's desperate for money, she goes. And we learn that a lot of people who are into true crime, they think her brother Ben is innocent. And so again, since she's desperate for money, she agrees to look into these murders and figure out what the truth is, and this club is paying her to do so. Through flashbacks, we see that her brother Ben just hung out with a bad crowd, and he was dating this girl who was very unstable and crazy, and he ends up getting her pregnant. And also in the flashbacks, we see that the mom was just really struggling financially. Plus, she was struggling with just drama with Ben because he was a moody teenager. Plus, he was accused of molesting 11-year-old girls, and we find out that was false and it didn't happen. But basically, the mom is just very stressed out with everything. And so long story short, we and Libby find out that one of her sisters was killed by Diondre, Ben's crazy girlfriend. And then the mom had actually hired a man to kill her so that they could use her life insurance policy so that her kids could have a better life. But then things go wrong and the guy also ends up killing one of the other sisters. But Ben, even though he was innocent, he took the blame because he wanted to protect Diondre and his unborn child. And he was also just kind of a dumb 15-year-old and didn't do much to make himself seem innocent. And that is why he has been in jail all this time. And so that's the basic plot. But so to get into the book review portion, what did you think of this book, Shannon?
I loved it. I love
Yeah.
this book. Yeah. I love her writing. I read Sharp Objects, and then this is the second one I've read. And I love her writing. I think it's great. Yeah.
That's interesting. You haven't read Gone Girl because that's the one I feel like is her most famous.
Yeah.
So I haven't read Sharp Objects, but did you like this one better?
It's really hard to say which one I like better because I like them both so much. Maybe I liked Sharp Objects a little bit better because I feel like there were a couple of things in Dark Places that I'm like, would somebody really do that? So I don't know. I think Sharp
Yeah.
Objects, maybe I liked it just a little bit better.
Yeah.
But I love both of them.
Yeah, in this book, I really liked it. I don't know, it was a tough one for me to review and rate because I enjoyed the different perspectives because we get it from Ben, Libby, and her mom. I forget the mom's name, like Patty or something. But so it was great characters, and Gillian Flynn, I think, is really good at creating just really great characters and character development and getting inside their heads. And it was very like edge of your seat, like I couldn't put it down and I wanted to know. And they made it seem like I could not decide if Ben was innocent or not because there were so
Yeah.
many things in his flashbacks that I was like, maybe he did do it after all. So it definitely kept me guessing.
Yeah.
But the reason why I ended up giving it a lower rating was almost like a good and bad thing, but it was just too descriptive at times. And I mean, the title is called Dark Places, and it definitely gets pretty dark. And so it was just too much for me personally. But she's an amazing writer, though, so it's nothing against her, the writing itself. But yeah, it's definitely some heavy things that are talked about and some grisly scenes that was just a bit too much for my taste. Before we get into the plot, were there any other just general book thoughts?
Actually, yeah. So I saw an interview that Gillian did talking about this book. A couple of things she said that were really interesting. The first thing, she said she was halfway through writing the first draft, and she was writing Libby as this likable character. And she got halfway through and she thought, I don't like this likable character. And this isn't how a person would be if they'd lived through those things. They wouldn't be nice and cheery and all. So then she went back and she rewrote the whole thing. So I thought that was really interesting because why would you even want to write her as a likable character? And that would just be boring and not true to life, because if you lived through that, you're going to have some issues.
Yeah.
So the other thing she said was that she got the inspiration for it from In Cold Blood by Truman Capote.
I've heard that's really good, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, I think I read it like a long, long time ago, but I can't really remember. I just know it was a true story. And she said she read it when she was a teenager and that it really stuck with her. And she wanted to write something about a family that got murdered in their home at night in Kansas, which was the same premise,
Oh,
the
interesting.
same kind of thing that happened. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is. And that's another thing where, again, it's just like my personal bias is true crime stuff. Like, it's just so upsetting. And so it's definitely not my like preferred thing. Like, I never read books about it or watch the shows. And so that was another thing with this book. Even though it was a novel, it just had that feel to it, obviously. And that's a big part of the story with Lyle and the club he's in. I don't know, it's just so sad, things that happen in real life.
Yeah, it was sad. It was, yeah.
But talking about Libby, that's a good segue because I definitely wanted to talk about her character. And specifically in the book, like you said, I love that her character wasn't the most likable. But again, that's so realistic. And I remember reading a quote by Gillian Flynn saying how she's so tired of like these strong female characters who have been through hard things, but they stay positive and just how it's not always realistic at all. And so I liked Libby.
I actually thought she was likable. I mean, she wasn't nice, but
yeah, like I didn't dislike her character, but if I knew her in real life, she seems like a difficult person.
yeah.
But it's totally understandable. And then all of like the different I don't know what the word is, but how she has to sleep with the light on and she doesn't eat meat. She talked about like dating a guy who was into self-help and had all these positive quotes around, and she was just like, no, like this is not for me. And so just these different things she does because of what she's experienced and how she was such a difficult teenager. So her aunt Dianne, who I liked her character, she was great, but she couldn't keep Libby when Libby was a child because she was just so difficult, and she even like accidentally kills Diane's dog. Again, it just seems so realistic that she would just, because of this trauma, just be a difficult person to be around. Getting into the movie, how do you think the movie did with portraying Libby?
I think the movie was really, really good. Like, I loved the movie. You could tell that a lot of the dialogue was just taken right out of the book. Like, they didn't even change it. So that was really great because it's so well written that you didn't need to change a whole lot. There were some things they changed, which I guess made sense for a movie, but one thing they changed I don't understand, and that was the red hair.
Yeah.
So Libby had red hair like her mother and like Ben, and then Ben dyed his black when he was 15. And they didn't show that. Like they showed that he dyed his hair black, but you didn't see really what it looked like before that.
And when we see him in the future, he's bald. So we
Yeah.
never see the red hair.
And the mother's hair wasn't like really red, and Libby's hair wasn't red, it was brown. And so I just thought that was odd that they would not keep it with the red hair, because it was like the three of them had that kind of connection that the rest of the family didn't have. And where he had dyed his hair black to cover it up because he didn't want to be like his mother. And then as an adult, Libby had bleached hers blonde because she didn't want to be reminded of her mother
Yeah.
either. But then you kind of lost that in the movie.
And that, it seems like such a simple thing. Like,
Yeah.
they could find a realistic wig for her to wear.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. I don't know why they made that change. And also with the movie, I mean, Charlize Theron also just, aside from the blonde hair, Libby is also supposed to be very short, and Charlize Theron is like 5'10". And I usually like her, but there were some things with her acting in the movie where, I don't know, it just seemed off in some way. So it's funny enough, I like the acting by everybody. I thought was pretty good, except for her. And maybe it was just she wasn't looking the part, and so I just wasn't buying it maybe too. Like, I wasn't lost in Libby. I was like, oh, it's Charlize Theron, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. She is a really good actress, though, but I do wish that they'd done the red hair thing. It didn't seem like Libby.
Yeah. And then her childhood, we don't get any details of that. Like, when she's talking to Ben, she talks about how, like, she's such an angry person. And she says something like I've hurt things, which in the book, like I said, she, like, kills
I think
a
she
dog.
said I've killed things.
Killed things.
Yeah. And we didn't really see what did that mean?
Yeah, which in the movie, I feel like if I hadn't read the book, I would have been like, oh, like that's intriguing. And I kind of like that they don't get specific. And then to talk about Dianne, because like I said, Dianne helped raise Libby at some point, but then she had to pass her off to different relatives. And then Dianne is still alive in present day. And as Libby is, looking back on her family, she reaches out to Dianne because Dianne had stopped talking to her. Whereas in the movie, they just have Dianne be dead.
Yep. Yeah, I thought that was strange too, although I guess they didn't really need her later.
Well, but I loved the ending scene with Dianne because she calls Dianne and Dianne isn't returning her calls. And so at the end of the book, because Libby has this great character arc, and at the end of the book, she finally makes the effort and shows up to Dianne's home. And Dianne is like, I knew you had it in you. And she's like, had what? And she's like, being willing to try and put in the effort. So I thought that was a great moment in the book. And again, I was like, it would have been so easy to include that in the movie, right? And it just, a perfect example of how she has changed since getting the closure that she needed through all of this.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing in the movie too, in the book, when they went to Chrissy Kate's house, when the mother and Dianne went there to confront them, they had Libby with them. And in the movie, they didn't.
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering why they made that change. Like, why wouldn't they want to have that? Because that would have added to Libby's, scars and trauma.
And I thought it was interesting in the book because when they meet Chrissy as an adult, she says something to Libby like, oh yeah, you were there that day when my mom showed up. And Libby had totally like erased that from her memory and didn't even remember. So I thought that was a good example of how she has learned to cope is just by forgetting a lot of things. But yeah, in the movie, she wasn't even there with her. So yeah, I don't know why they changed that as well.
Yeah.
So moving on to Lyle, he was part of this club that is...
Was it the Kill Club?
Yeah, so Lyle is part of the Kill Club, which is people
Yeah.
who are obsessed with true crime. And I did like how this was kind of a commentary on how people can be so obsessed with it, make it so impersonal, like not realizing these are like people's lives that they're
Yeah.
talking about. But I did like the quote where he's talking to her about it, and it kind of explains why people become so obsessed. And he's talking about Libby and her family, and he says, it's an insane crime. A lot of it isn't going to make sense. That's why people are obsessed with these murders. If they made any sense, they wouldn't really be mysteries, right? And even though I'm not into true crime, I thought that was a good point where it's just the mystery of it all.
Yeah.
And I could see how people would become obsessed.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm obsessed with it, but I'm always very interested in it, especially like serial killers and stuff like that. But I don't know if I'd want to be a member of a kill club because I feel like those people
Yeah.
are just a little out there. Like
Yeah,
I'm
that's a
not
bit...
quite out there that much.
Yeah. And he
Yeah.
made it seem like his club was different. And he was like, oh, we're the solvers. Like, we're
Yeah.
not like weirdos. We just want to solve the crime. And also, a big part of this club is that there are people who are trying to figure out who this guy is, who is called the Angel of Debt, because he will kill people so that their families can get their life insurance policy. And this obviously comes full circle because that is who his mom had hired. And there are a number of things that kind of come full circle in the book specifically that I just thought were so well done, which, returning back to Libby, how in book and movie we see that she's constantly stealing just like these small things. And in the movie that never really comes full circle, but in the book it does, because kind of jumping around here. But when she meets Diondre, she steals from their bathroom, and then later they need DNA evidence. She's like, oh, like I have her lipstick because I stole it. And so it's this big moment. Yeah, I just love how the book had so many things like that, where it's like slowly piecing together and coming full circle. And Lyle, another thing I liked about him in the book was how he, at the end, near the end of the book, he's having a birthday party and he invites Libby, and he's like, I'm just having close friends there, like implying that he considers her a close friend. And he's there when she remembers she has the lipstick, and I think they hug and they're just so excited. And so, again, showing how Libby is being more open to these relationships. And the movie kind of left that out too. Like, I didn't feel like she and Lyle were growing particularly close.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it seemed different for sure.
moving on to Diondre. So, like I said, I haven't read Sharp Objects, so I don't know if it's like a female villain. Is it a spoiler to say whether or not there's a female villain in that one?
There is.
There is. And then Gone Girl has one as well. Yeah, I know. I've heard quotes by Gillian Flynn saying that she wishes there was more like female villains. And so she has one in this book as well, because we have Diondre, who is just very, like, she seems like she has some kind of personality disorder.
Yeah, she was a strange character, Diondre. That
Yeah.
was, I don't know. I was pretty surprised by what she did to the
Was it
sister.
her actions that you said didn't make sense, you thought?
Yeah, like, and I can almost see her like strangling her like that if she was mad enough. I could kind of see her losing control, but I didn't quite buy that Ben wouldn't have stopped her. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not sure about that.
Yeah.
That
I
he
agree.
that he would love Diondre more than his own sister. I'm not sure that was. I don't know.
Yeah, Ben, I didn't really like his character. Like, as a teenager, I get he's a teenager going through hormonal stuff, and he's not popular at school or anything. So I get he has all these things going on, and his family is so poor. But yeah, his character, I didn't really like, and every time he would do something, I was just like, man, like, stop it. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And including covering up for Diondre. And when he's talking to Libby when he's in prison, he said something about how, like, when the trial was happening, how he almost felt cool or something because people suspected him. And she was confused by it, and I was confused. Like, what? Like, that's doesn't even make sense. But I guess he was just so desperate for attention.
I guess so. And I don't know. I guess that's because the father wasn't there, and or the
That's
father
true.
was who he was, and
Yeah.
I don't know. It was strange. It was very the whole cow thing that bothered me. That
Yeah,
was like, why? Like, are you really that desperate for friends?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of, like, his friends, so we have Diondre, who he is dating, but then they also hang out with Trey. And I was sort of confused why Diondre was, like, in a relationship with Ben more so than Trey, because it seemed like she and Trey were, like, the two buddies that would always pick on Ben. I guess Ben she was able to easily manipulate, so that's why she was with him. But
Yeah.
yeah, they definitely had this weird relationship going on because Trey was always hanging around too, making fun of Ben, and she just allowed it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when Libby meets Ben in prison, she sees like part of a tattoo of someone's name ending in LLY. And so he asks him about it. And he's like, oh, it's, someone I thought I was in love with, and I thought I would marry her, but I didn't.
Yep.
And this also comes full circle because early on in the book, when he talks about meeting Diondre, he says she gave him a fake name. But that was a detail that I just kind of forgot about until the end of the book. When they meet adult Trey, he says how Diondre was always giving out fake names. And her favorite one was Polly Palm.
Yep.
And so then it's like, oh, like that's the tattoo. And I forgot that she would give fake names. So again, another full circle type moment that I really loved. And that was in the movie as well. So I guess we can now move on to when she finds Diondre, because they couldn't find her under the name Diondre, but when they look for Polly Palm, they are able to find her. And what did you think of Diondre's reaction when she opens the door and sees Libby?
It was bizarre, but her whole character is bizarre.
Yeah, because
the thing I found
happy.
the weirdest is that she would tell her daughter what she did.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you tell your daughter that you murdered somebody?
Yeah. That's what made me think, like, she must have some sort of disorder, because a normal person wouldn't be that honest. Because, she has Ben's daughter there, and that's in book and movie. And they talk about how the daughter is like, oh, please don't send my mom to jail, like, we're best friends and blah, blah, blah. And so they definitely have this close relationship, but it also just seems like this weird, maybe manipulative relationship, too, that Diondre has going on.
Yeah, like codependent or something.
Yeah, agreed. And so, when she sees Libby, she's like, oh, I knew you would find me someday. And I liked the scene, but it was not what I was expecting of how she reacted. And then one change from book to movie is, so she's talking with Diondre and the daughter, and Libby is talking about one of her sisters, because the daughter, I forget the name of Diondre's daughter, but she's like, oh, tell me about my family, like, what were my other aunts like? And so she's telling her about one of the sisters and how she had a crush on some guy, and then the daughter, like, names the guy, and Libby is like, how would she know the name? And then she goes in the bathroom, she steals some lipstick, and then she realizes, like, they have her last journal that she had been writing, which means Diondre was involved.
Yeah.
And so she comes back out, and by this time, Diondre and the daughter realize their mistakes, so then they, like, hit her and try to knock her out. I don't think they do, though, right? But they, like, push her in the basement. But in the movie, there isn't that line where she slips and says, like, makes it obvious that they had the journal. Instead, they just hit her on the head just because, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in both, Libby ends up escaping and Lyle picks her up.
I thought it was interesting where they had, in the movie, they kind of went back and forth with Libby is running and Ben is chasing her and calling after her the night of the murders. They kept going back and forth to the present where she's running and Diondre is chasing her.
Yeah.
And where she's being chased both times. I thought that was neat how they kept going back and forth with that.
Yeah, that was a great scene. And the movie, I think this was in the book, but in the movie, she remembers that Ben had come up to her and he saw where she was. And he was like, Libby, like, stay where you are to keep her safe. I don't remember him saying that in the book, though.
I don't think he did. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so maybe they were trying to make him a bit more likable in the movie with that scene. And so another detail with Ben that also helps us segue into the dad was how when Ben is with Diondre and Trey, they go to see the dad, whose name is Runner, and the dad is he's a bad father, and he and he, like, bullies his kids and teases them and is just very mean. And so Ben, as a way to, again, like, he's constantly trying to seem tough, and so he tells his dad, trying to be impressive, being like, hey, like, Diondre's pregnant and it's my baby. Like, Runner's response, though, was that, well, you better make sure it's yours, because it probably isn't. Yeah. I thought it was a very fitting response with his character.
It was,
Yeah.
And the scene, I thought, with the father, where Libby tracks him down and he's living in that dump, that toxic wasteland.
Yeah.
And when they're down in whatever that was, where she climbed down the ladder, I thought that whole scene was really good.
Yeah, and that played out, like, very similar in book and movie. And it's just so awkward because he's treating her like a child and he's, like, holding her being like, say uncle, say uncle. So, yeah, I thought that was a great scene in the movie. Yeah. That was very similar to the book. And then I forget, he does give her some piece of information. He mentions Trey, I guess, or
Trey,
something. Yeah. But I also loved with the dad how he's just always asking for money, and he writes her being like, I know the whole story. I just need $500 and I can do it for you. Yeah, he's just like a piece of trash person throughout the whole story.
Yep. What did you think about what the mother did? Like the whole thing about her hiring somebody to kill her.
So in the book, I definitely was not expecting that. And when her lender is the one who suggests it in the book, and so she goes to meet him, and I was just like, what is going on right now? And then that was a big part too in book and movie, is Libby climbs into bed with her mom, and her mom is like, I love you, Libby. And looking back, she's like, did she know something was going to happen? And we learn she thought she knew she was going to die that night. And so would I do that? No. But I felt like it was realistic for her character, and Gillian Flynn did a really good job at showing just the desperate situation she was in financially, plus with the police. And so I feel like it was realistic of her character.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a hard time with it. I feel like she was depressed, so I can see how maybe it could lead to, the depression and the desperation. But then I think, but your son is going to go to jail for molesting all these kids, and don't you want to stick around to help him and make sure that he's okay?
I guess she thought, like her life insurance money would pay for a lawyer.
Pay for it, but
that still doesn't guarantee anything.
Right.
And maybe she wanted it. She says how she didn't have a useful life, but maybe she can have a useful death. And also maybe she just was tired of dealing with it all, and also wanting to just escape all of the drama and stress. Which, coming back to when they meet Diondre, when Libby meets Diondre, what reveals it in the movie, I forgot to say, is that her mom had this necklace she would wear. And so she sees it in Diondre's home. And so in the movie, that's what clues her in that Diondre was involved. And speaking of the mom, she's played by Christina Hendricks in the movie, who I thought she did a good job. And she's from Mad Men. I don't know if you watched that show, but she's amazing in Mad Men, so it's cool to see her in this. And
I never watched it.
Redhead, but yeah. Were there any other last-minute changes that you noticed from book to film? Or any scenes you really liked in the movie?
In the book, she had frostbite, right? From hiding all night in the winter. And then in the movie, it didn't seem like it was winter. Mm-hmm. I don't remember there being snow.
I think they say it's October.
And it showed like she tripped or hurt her foot or something, but I don't think it was frostbite. I thought that was a strange change to make, but maybe they didn't know how to film it where she's like missing a finger or whatever.
Yeah, true. And that was another change where maybe because I personally just hate the cold. And so books that take place in the cold, and that's part of the experience, it just adds so much more discomfort for me. And we get that discomfort when she's hiding in the snow, but also just with Ben, because throughout that day leading up to that night, he's just biking around and he falls and he's in the cold, and then he's just wanting to go home because he's cold and he's hungry, and being with Diondre isn't helping. And so I thought the cold really added to the ambiance.
Yeah.
And so then moving on to book versus movie, which when I was looking up reviews for this movie, I was surprised at how many people disliked it.
Really?
Yeah, and I was confused why. Like, some of the people had read the book, but there were people who hadn't read the book who just, they thought it was boring, was like a common one that I saw. Yeah, I didn't think it was boring though. And I even knew what was going to happen, and it still had me interested. My biggest complaint, like I said, was like specifically Charlize Theron, which I'm not sure how you say her name, but her acting just, I don't know, I wasn't really engaged in her character. Whereas in the book, I was very engaged in Libby as a character. So that was my biggest complaint. But which one would you say ultimately wins, the book or the movie?
I have to say the book.
Yeah. But you did really like the movie.
I really liked the movie, though. Yeah.
But what was it about the book that just made it better?
I think I just felt like I got more inside Libby in the book, like more into her thoughts and things, more so than in the movie.
Yeah. Which in the movie, too, there was a ton of narration, like voiceover. And I thought it was a bit too much.
Yeah.
Like, it was a bit, I get they're trying to put us in her head, but yeah, I felt like that was almost distracting. And it was said when it wasn't necessary. Like the whole show don't tell. There were times where they could have just shown us, but instead they told us in voiceover. Mm-hmm. So that was another complaint I had. Yeah, so ultimately I agree that the book was better, which with one like this, it's hard to say, because if I'd watched the movie first, I wonder, it kept me interested, but I wonder if I would have been on the edge of my seat wondering, because I wasn't, because I already knew what would
Yeah,
happen. So
yeah.
it almost seems unfair to judge considering I read the book first, but I definitely found it more engaging. Although I did like that the movie wasn't as graphic, like with the deaths. The book is pretty grisly with that part, and so I like that the movie wasn't.
Yeah, I was glad they didn't show, like you said, it wasn't graphic in the movie, and especially the cow scene. I didn't like
Yeah,
that the cow
I
thing.
skipped through that in the movie because I was like, I don't need to see this.
Yeah, but they didn't really show a lot, so it wasn't that bad. But
Yeah,
and I guess, because part of the book is about like this whole cult Satanism, whatever
right,
that was going on at that time in the 80s.
right.
But yeah, I don't know. The cow thing was it was just bizarre how they took him there, didn't tell him what was going on, give him
And they
this
did
drug,
drugs.
and he just goes along with it.
Yeah, which again, I guess I forgot about that part because that does make more sense with Diondre, how she ended up killing the sister because
Yeah.
she still had this in her system. So I guess that explains that a bit more. But yeah, so ultimately, we both agree that the book wins.
Yeah, she's just such a great writer that it's hard to top it.
Yeah, and it's funny, she has like a novella called The Grown Up, but then she only has like 3 novels.
Yep.
And her last one, I think, was Gone Girl, so that was
Yep.
like 10 years ago.
It is,
I'm kind
yeah.
of surprised she hasn't written something else.
Hopefully she's working on a new one.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that wraps it up. Real quick, just to do some self-promotion. Ty Sheridan plays Ben, and I think Ty Sheridan is a great actor, so I wanted to mention some other stuff I've covered with him. So Joe, he was in the movie Joe, which I loved. He was also in The Tender Bar, which I really liked a lot. And then Christina Hendricks, who plays the mom from Mad Men, she was also in Crooked House, which is the same director as this one, so Gilles Peke Brenner. So I think that's cool when actors and directors reunite for movies. So they were both involved in Crooked House, which is an Agatha Christie adaptation. So yeah, that wraps it up for this episode. Thank you again, Shannon, for joining us. I will link to your YouTube channel, so everybody should go check her out.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Yeah. Join me next week where I will be doing a new release. I'll be talking about The Gray Man, which is a new Netflix movie. So tune in for that one. And don't forget to give this a thumbs up and to subscribe to my channel if you have not. And again, go check out Shannon's. Go check out her books since September. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.